Yeah. What's your name? Joe. Oh my gosh.
Okay. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for coming. I'd like to welcome you to North Tonawanda for our educational summit and rally today. My name is Greg Wojtyla. I'm the superintendent of NT Schools, and we're very proud and happy to have all of you here. For the last 3 or 4 years, and especially this last budget season in Albany, education has really been under attack, so to speak. And we have a great panel here to talk to you about all these things you're hearing in the news and maybe have more questions about or aren't clear on. So we're going to have this televised as well on a YouTube sort of feed that Mr. Sable's hooking up over there. And he will be our MC for the night. Mr. Sable is a teacher in North Tonawanda City Schools. He's a father, lives in Niagara Wheatfield, and is the board president in Niagara Wheatfield. So he has many hats, and he was nice enough to organize this event for us. And we are glad to have you all here. Once again, the purpose of the night really is to educate you on a lot of the things that you hear as sound bites on the news, or maybe from friends that are teachers or parents. So I fully believe the best fight in this war is to be educated, so you know what exactly is being proposed in Albany and just how ludicrous a lot of it is that's coming out of Albany. So we hope that you enjoy this evening, and I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Sable. Let's give him a round of applause.
Well, I'm doing this under a little different circumstance than the last time I was talking in front of a crowd of people before we didn't have a budget that destroyed education, and tonight we don't have much of an education system left. Can I ask Mrs. Gillen, do you care to go up on the stage for me? She's volunteered to help me with something real quick. And Mr. McCall, there's a big stack of papers on my chair. Would you mind carrying that up there? Mrs. Gillen is playing an assembly member today. And of course, our friend Andrew will be watching over her, making sure that she reads through that bill that was approved by the assembly. But to read through it, she's getting 1 hour, because that is how long the assembly had before they voted on the education bill. That many pages. So you teach reading. I'm very confident that you'll be able to get through that in an hour. And I'm going to start the timer up here for you right now. So there we go. And we'll check back in on you. So tonight we have a great lineup of speakers. It's one of those moments that came together and we said, hey, North Tonawanda needs something like this. North Tonawanda needs that recognition of being one of the educational hotspots in Western New York. I know that NC is very dear to me. I went to school here since kindergarten, Spruce School kid, then over to the middle school and so on. So it's funny, I have parents still calling me up asking me where did all the bike trails go because they lost their kids. So not much changes in North Tonawanda. Tonight we have a fantastic panel of speakers. You're going to hear from inspirational tales, inspirational letters, all the way to exactly what happened when the Assembly and Senate voted in favor of the governor's educational proposals. So, I would like to ask first, Ryan, if you would like to come up here. Ryan is a student in Frontier Central School District. He has a fantastic presentation. I gotta get the audio working. I had the other audio device running. 1 second.
School sucks. Now don't get me wrong, I believe everyone should have a general education. But when I know how to solve quadratic equations with imaginary roots graphically, and I'm not sure how that applies to life, or better yet, when Cleopatra slept around and never heard the history of my own city, you failed. Now, I'm not trying to sound cool, but we live in a generation that would much rather smoke a joint than show up to school, and to be honest, I'm tired of placing all the blame on them. I mean, are we just pawns in a chess game waiting to accept their fate? Could the whole point of high school simply be just to graduate? You tell us to follow our dreams, but have a plan B, and don't you see? The more you try to protect the children in this way, the more you reject the gifts they're trying to portray. See, school is a project, and students never get the chance to project their abilities. Having to follow a curriculum and take required classes, while stereotypically, they go with high grades and glasses and make it into college that's more intelligent. Well, how about the student who's ingenious, inordinary, innovative, intellectual, incalculable, who listens, who has intentions to change the world with his passion? I believe educating him would be something along the lines of ineligible. Take a musician, for example. See, to him, a score on a math exam will never mean as much as the score in front of him. Why waste his time trying to count and measure when he can already count each measure with just a tap of his foot? See, this is genius. Watch as the bow braces against the instrument and his fingers pluck and pull the instrument perfectly that creates a sound that just makes his body sway. But if he's controlled by a bell that just rings, I guess you could say the school is pulling the strings. Or how about the cook with only a 7th grade reading level? If his ingredient list is not written in MLA format, I think he'll do just fine. This is grammar matter, and where you just dine is on the line, and I'm not talking about margarine. But when it comes to margarine and butter, he actually knows the difference. He couldn't care less about the sophisticated words coming out of his mouth, but more about the food going into yours. See, this is genius. And if that's until the Hunger Games appetite, you couldn't even think the grapes of Rathbun. Some brilliance is as simplistic as hitting a ball. It doesn't matter if the science rate is an atrocity, because I've never seen anyone spike balls with strength, precision, and velocity. And the only elements you need know are those of speed and surprise, but for parents' eyes, what is just a waste of time. See, this is genius. Practicing for so long, so there's little time to study for chemistry, the only question remaining is why can't you be more like your sister Emily? What's the matter? Kind of ironic though, because like life when it comes to school versus education, everything's the matter. Putting children on an assembly line that has checkpoints, where their only goal is to get us from point A to point Z, but if we only get to F, then we failed. Plus our values and gifts are locked up and jailed. And why do we take tests? To tell us we're wrong? It's a number, not my wife. There's so much more to life than a grade in a book. And what did you know of the SAT I just took? Because we all receive a number or a grade, if you will, but our answers are locked in the vaults. What's the point to learn? Or the thrill? And Common Core won't solve anything, so take a chill pill. We are not here to memorize facts, but figure our future. But if the future holds taking a test to see who's the best, I want no part in that, there's a fact. Now, while I'm speaking to adults, I'm relating to the youth, I'm not pointing out your faults, but showing the truth. Stop labeling us by standards and put us all on an even playing field. But let us use our positions based on our passions, values, and where we can be proactive, make schooling less multiple choice and more interactive. Because maybe you're exponential at math, but that's not how he functions, because we all don't have the same mechanics. Or possibly you rock at science, but in her opinion, she'd rather not fill in the space. We're all sculpted in a different way, all made with different values, ideas, and clay, and during my day, the only offered opportunity is continuity. I can never get the chance to say, I am genius. Hey. I'm just going to get rolling in a little speech here now. I look around at the students, teachers, administrators, and school board members and see no reason to introduce myself formally, because you already know who I am. I'm the student in the classroom who can focus the conversation with a thoughtfully well-timed question. I'm the student who stays behind in class to further discuss topics and themes that stretch beyond the textbooks and tests. I'm the student playing soccer who realizes being a team far exceeds simply winning a game, and that the blood, sweat, and hours of practice lead to strong bonds that cannot be broken. I'm the student in the musical who at curtain call looks at familiar faces and realizes that he was part of something more valuable than he may ever grasp. I'm the student body president who campaigns and works hard to advocate for every student. I'm the student who is strong-willed and bold, not afraid to use my voice, which is why I stand here in front of you tonight. Odds are, everyone here knows someone in some way like me. The thinker, the athlete, the performer, and the voice. What makes me unique is the sum total of each of these positions, these experiences, and these moments. But to each of you, my parents, my teachers, and the countless others who have both influenced and impacted me in my life, you already knew that. No, instead I'm here to introduce myself to Governor Cuomo. He knows me as number 138 in a cohort of 405 based on the statistical analysis pertaining to my GPA of a 91.40, which falls within the 34th percentile of my class, where I rank ahead of 267 students and behind another 137. This same numerical data sees me as a 63% on a chemistry regents examination, despite an entire year of working tirelessly on labs, doing homework, and hours of studying. This would stand as the only test I had ever failed. But despite that failure, it is impossible to ignore what was really learned. Do not tell me I am wrong when many of the things I've learned sprout from trial and error. Do not tell me I am a number, because in soccer we are taught to play for the name on the front of the jersey, not the number on the back. Do not tell me I am just a test score, because I value a musical score just as much. Do not tell me I'm a statistic unless you want me to go ballistic, like the vest I wear to absorb your bullets, because the Common Core is just too weak. The governor sees me as a family test scorer rather than someone who took failure as a learning experience for life. He sees me as an average instead of a student who is well-read, well-rounded, and willing to embrace education. He sees me as an opportunity to increase state revenue rather than increase my state of mind through thought-provoking discourse. By continuing on this path of stripping away our identity and taking away what makes us unique, you forge generations of students who are less like people and more like pawns in a game of chess, thoughtlessly accepting their fate. I'll finish with this. I value the opportunities that have come from my school and my education. As a young student with a voice trying to speak for a generation of innovators, artists, musicians, athletes, inventors, and so many others, I would say this. Belief is more powerful than knowing, and imagination is more powerful than knowledge. Einstein understood knowledge and our quest for it, but he wouldn't understand the stripping away of our human spirit. It is our right to learn, and it is our ability to fail and get up again, and our desire to endure and be successful that defines us. We are asking for help. Our schools can give us a place to achieve so much if it weren't for bad policies and bad politics. As a junior, I still have more than a year left in which school will be a part of my life from 7 a.m. to 3 p.m. 5 days a week. I am more than a number. When I walk across stage at graduation, the teacher will not read number 138, but say my name. I'm Ryan Lataki, and I thank you for listening.
Ryan Lataki. Our first two speakers exemplify why all of us are here. And when I say all of us, it's not just the teachers who come here every day and teach children, but the parents. They're the first line of teachers. From the day the child's born, all the way up until they cry because they're leaving for kindergarten that first time, which I did with two of my own children. You constantly want to see growth, but not growth as in a number. Growth as in creativity, growth as in imagination, in play, in ingenuity. Ryan, you exemplified that. That is exactly what the youth of program to that, New York State and the United States needs. This next young lady swept my Board of Ed off our feet on our meeting on Wednesday night. We've sort of been on a crusade. We've been passing resolutions. We have one right now that's going, that's been being banded around by us right now for wording, which basically tells the governor, you know what, you can take your test scores and we're not going to bother using them to ever terminate anyone in our district. I'll send Greg and Colleen a copy when I'm done writing that. But this young lady is a Niagara Wakefield student in 4th grade. I got to know her when I coached her in soccer so many years ago with my own daughter. And again, she wrote a letter to the governor. You just need to hear it. And that's Hayden Geibel.
Hi, my name is Hayden Geibel. I wrote a letter to the governor, and I just wanted to share it with you. Dear Governor Cuomo, I'm sure you know that the New York State tests are coming up next week. The purpose of these tests is to grade teachers on how well they teach. I'm a 4th grader at Eric Road, and my teacher, Mrs. Sayers, is one of the best teachers I've ever had. I don't need a test to show me that. She might get a low score just because some students don't show growth, even though she has helped every single student in my class. She's a great teacher because she cares. She cares about our education. The New York State test can't show me that. No test can show how well teachers are teaching. The New York State test put a lot of pressure on kids, and some of them can't handle it. Knowing that their teacher might get in trouble based on what they do is a little scary to them. These New York State tests aren't right, and they need to stop. We should be using the money we spend on them to reduce our class sizes or things that will help us learn better. Then we'll be happier and get a better education. Respectfully, Hayden Geibel.
Again, there's no number that can measure that ability. Our next speaker is one of a parent that I've gotten to know very well over the past couple of years. We've been coaching her daughter for the varsity girls soccer team. She's a second team all NFL player, 10th in her class. So as the primary teacher of her children, she's done a phenomenal job in moving her right along school in was it Cortland or Geneseo? You know, that she's going to go to. And I don't see how the governor can say that these kids are not college and career ready, because they are. And I would like to call up Mrs. Joanna Porto.
Hi. Hope that sounds okay. It's hard to follow the two students. That was amazing. Mr. Sabo asked me to speak to give the parents' perspective. I've been hiding out for the last couple of years since I served on the board, and I'll talk about that later. But I didn't really want to do this, but sometimes you got to step up and share. Everyone has their own perspective as parents, and I'm going to tell you things that you know already. We've watched all these changes occur, but I will speak to my experience. I have two daughters. One of them is in 12th grade that Mr. Sabo referenced, and the other is in 8th grade. My kids are high achievers. They're fairly intelligent kids, and I say that because I know that genetics controls that. I married a smart guy. I have some smart genes apparently in my family lineage. So I'm just along for the ride, and I'm doing the best I can as a parent, like every other parent in the world. Sometimes you hear of high achievers, and I think some people think like, oh, we've got it made. But I'm not going to complain. I just want to say it isn't always easy. My kids are great. They're curious. They're quick to learn material. They're eager to please teachers. They're not eager to please their parents. But they're also very sensitive. They're perfectionists. They're worriers. And I mean, weight of the world, can't fall asleep worriers. They're fiercely competitive, and that can be a good or a bad thing. And with all that intelligence rolling around up in their heads, sometimes there's not much room left for common sense. So that's our situation. As a parent, I started out volunteering in the classroom in the early grades, got involved with the Homeschool Association. I ran box tops for a year. Then I went on to join the Shared Decision-Making Committee, active with booster clubs for sports, and then eventually I ran for the Board of Education. I kind of felt like, put up or shut up activism. My kids' path has been, of course, they're excited learners. So early on, they were put in the highest groups for reading and math. When you differentiate within the classroom, they were pulled out for gifted and talented programs, which really worked well for them. And I hate that term, gifted and talented, but it doesn't matter because now it's gone. They got to participate in the MPP program in 5th and 6th grade. That's our district's version of pulling some kids with life learning skills and letting them be around each other and explore the information they're being taught to degrees that maybe we couldn't in a regular classroom. That was a terrific skill building experience, and it let them be comfortable. Sometimes girls especially dumb it down when they get older, and my kids have never done that. So I'm grateful to our district and all of our teachers for every great experience that my kids have had. I think underfunding has had the biggest impact on my kids' education. But as far as testing and over-testing for them, because the material seems to be stick to teaching what's going to be on the test, they don't get the breadth of learning that they would have otherwise gotten. And that, I think, is the most important thing when you're growing up. Why is something work? Why not? And the teachers they don't have time to do that anymore to get to delve into it. The pre-tests were very weird for my kids because typically they know a lot of material on the tests, and no kid knows when you come in September and are asked things that you haven't learned yet. So that's been different. And as far as state assessments in any case, even if they're not worried for themselves, they don't want to hurt their teachers or their school. I feel like that as a parent. I've struggled with the decision about opting out for that reason. The errors on the tests have impacted my kids. They both came home and said, what's up with this? There were obvious mistakes. There were 2 answers. There were misspellings on the actual questions. And, so what I heard from them was, why am I even taking this test that wasn't proofread? They expect us to be doing everything perfectly. I think it erodes that. But as far as the underfunding also, I feel like we've been doing this for 20 years or more probably, just trying to do more with less. What has it done? There's more kids in the classes than there used to be. Sports has been significantly reduced, and some districts just done away with big chunks of it. Of course, music, art, electives, they're bare bones at this point. In elementary school, I remember it used to be every other day, and then it became, only twice a cycle, and now once. Those are the things that some of the things that some kids will ignite them and light them up, and they're just going away because that's the only area that we can cut. Home ec classes, parenting classes, higher level classes that you can delve into topics and ignite their passions are just all taken away. There's not many electives left for kids in the high school. Of course, GT and enrichment opportunities are just gone. So I would categorize this as erosion, is what I've seen. So I got involved, and as many others have, and I hope do. And first I would come to board meetings and speak up and beg for members not to cut this or that. A few years later, I ran for school board and I got elected, and I sat there and listened to parents beg for us not to cut. It was really hard to do. I had all these great ideas. I thought, I'm going to come in and I'm going to raise revenue, and I kept bringing up all these ideas and finding out the grants that are available are public money, and they come with strings attached, and sometimes they do more harm than good. The private money doesn't fund public. They won't give you grants for public education, and that's where all the money is right now, private. I wanted to advertise. What about putting ad space on school buses? Or sell the naming rights to buildings or sports complexes, and apparently that's not allowed in New York State. Selling property, the district has done this, and it continues to, but it's only a Band-Aid. Even the box tops for education, I wanted to make that citywide, and I guess it's my fault. It didn't really catch on. I didn't get it to go, but they're all worth 10 cents, and I figured if there were bins all over the city, at least we could get thousands of dollars from General Mills, but that didn't work either. So I got engaged with other districts. The School Board Association for Niagara Orleans County, the New York State School Board Association, groups, districts banding together and lobbying politicians and doing letters and trying to impact in numbers, but it always fell on deaf ears. It's like nothing made it past the doorway to that infamous room with the 3 men in it. It was just, here you go. Sorry, we're still going to do what we want to do. So after 3 years of that, after one term, many emotionally draining actions as a board member, feeling, when the citizens would come, and especially the students, and stand up here and talk about how awesome their music class has been for them and what it meant to them and it saved their lives. Hearing from a parent who said a social worker or a guidance counselor saved their child's life, literally, and or the other part of that, which I never thought about before I was on the board. My worst meeting, we passed a budget, and I had to raise my hand and say aye, where we cut 63 positions, and those were community members, people that I knew. People who I knew were expecting a child or just bought a house, and I can't describe to you what that feels like. I went home, I sobbed my eyes out, and I had to vote yes for it because otherwise it would have been worse. It would have been a deeper cut, so that was the option. So then I wrote a My View column to the Buffalo News, calling out Governor Cuomo for bullying. And this was a couple of years ago, and I waved my white flag and I didn't run for re-election. So that was 2 years ago, and I feel like I've given you some dark, information here, but I feel like there's a lot of silver linings. First of all, the people here tonight are the groups that I think are finally united, and instead of coming to a board member and a board meeting and begging for us not to cut things, if we take that energy and redirect it, the anger and the activism up to the people who have the power to make the changes, perhaps something more can be done. Parents, teachers, unions, school boards, administrators, we're all on the same page. We're all here for the same reasons. It's educating our kids, and there's nothing more important than that. The other part of it is a teachable moment for the kids. It's great to see the kids speaking and the kids who are here, and even the discussions in our homes where it needs to take place. They're learning about civic engagement and responsibility and participating in their democracy. So what can we do? The experts will tell you more about that. But I feel like there's one thing I can do, and we can all do as parents, is refuse these flawed, profit-driven, corporate power-supporting tests. I want to send the governor the message that even though we can't afford to help him buy his way into a presidential bid, that We are the citizens he represents, and we will no longer participate in this fiefdom that disregards our opinions, our expertise, and the institution of public education that I feel is one of the backbones to our nation and our strength as a nation, and it's being eroded. So this is too important. So my 8th grader turned in her letter today, and I hope every parent who wants to get rid of this bad tool with me will also turn in that letter. And by bad tool, I was talking about the test, not the governor. Thank you.
As Joanne said, being on the school board is it's a lose-lose situation. No matter what you do, someone is always upset with you. But you learn something. You learn that your decisions are not just being made for that year, but for 5, 10 years down the road. You have to protect the integrity of the district and the financial stability of the district. If that erodes, communities, housing costs, housing value can drop significantly. People aren't able to sell their homes. The ability for you to recoup that money that you lost is just imaginable. It's impossible. We're seeing it across the state right now. Wheatfield, $26 million taken away from GEA. $26 million where we would have never had to raise taxes for the past 5 years. NT's at what, 24 or so? 28. It's $28 million of your money went somewhere else besides back to your community in North Tonawanda. In 2 neighboring communities, over $50 million. Boards are also battling another threat right now, and that's charter schools. And where you hear the charters constantly saying, it's great, hey, thank you, Governor Cuomo, you've gone out there and spoke up for the children. Well, when you're a board member, board president particularly, you lobby constantly. Usually this time of year, I'm writing letters and getting calls to the senators saying, you have a little bit of bullet aid left. I know you budgeted $25 million of that. This year, Dean Skelos made a nice announcement for all of us to not even bother calling up and lobbying for it. Because all $25 million is earmarked for charter schools. So you're fighting, board members, board presidents, we're fighting on multiple fronts right now. And it's not getting any easier. So to hear how difficult that can be and some of the other things I face, and I'd like to invite up Colleen Osborne, my fellow board presidents in Niagara County, to give her a little take on the way things have been going here in education.
Hi, everybody. It took me a little while to develop this, and I'd be lying to say that I haven't read it to about 100 people already, just to make sure that it got across the message I wanted it to get across. So I'm going to start by a little background in what I know of education and what research I did. Testing in education has existed for hundreds of years. In China, the earliest proficiency testing happened in 1115 BC. But it took until 1908 for the qualification of educational data to be developed, thanks to individuals like Cochrane, Pearson, Fisher, and Gulfer. American educators quickly realized that the scale idea could be utilized not only for intelligence testing, but achievement testing as well. By 1920, objective testing formed the core of educational assessment tools used. Today, approximately 1.25 million standardized tests are administered annually in schools and colleges throughout the United States. So the question remains, should teachers be evaluated on the tests that are taken by their students? Well, to truly understand this need, I needed to relate it to something that I understood and look at it from a different angle at a different topic with a different view. So as a nurse, I often use testing to help my patients. We go over blood work results, x-rays, CAT scans, office visits, immunizations, and etc. All of these tests are used to help paint a picture of a patient's health and point us in the direction of how we can fix it, cure it, or help them. So how is this different from education and testing? Well, in essence, it's not. With that being said, let's look at a scenario in healthcare. A patient who is diabetic, or in other words, has high blood sugar, takes a blood test to see how they're doing and if their sugars are too high or too low. They come to the doctor's office for a visit. They get a prescription for medication, information on how to control their disease, a consult, and a follow-up appointment. The patient leaves, and on their way home, they stop at the donut shop for 2 large donuts, leave the script in the car for 4 weeks, forget to come to their follow-up, and 6 months later can't figure out why their blood sugar is high. Are we evaluating the effectiveness of their healthcare provider based on the outcome? No, we're not. Are we penalizing the provider with a bad review or threatening their livelihood? No, we're not. If we used those same tactics on doctors as we're using on teachers, how many in this room wouldn't have a physician after they were discharged from their practice for not following their advice or rules? So then why are we using our student scores to evaluate our teachers? The tests administered by doctors' offices are used to help fix a problem, to improve a patient's health. How are the students' tests going to be used to help our teachers individually with their performance? The feedback you get is not going to give you a diagnostic tool to help the individual student or the teacher for that matter. Currently, there's 4 models of tests for each grade level to prevent cheating, but they also evaluate different skill sets given randomly at different schools at different times. Doesn't seem 100% fair to me. Now, don't get me wrong. I do think that a certain level of testing is necessary to keep us competitive and to keep our education system globally fit. I just don't think the outcomes of those tests should have anything to do with how we evaluate our teachers. So let's relate this to a topic that's something even more personal. I can relate it to my own educational experience. When I was in 4th grade, believe it or not, it wasn't that long ago, I was tested. I remember taking the test, and I remember in 5th grade getting to spend several extra days taking additional tests because of the way I had scored. You see, I had scored lower than the rest of the class at that time. It didn't predict my future, it didn't set my destiny, and it certainly wasn't a reflection of my teacher. It probably was because my grandfather had died. And my 5th grade teacher shouldn't have been scored poorly on an evaluation for that reason. You see, he knew I was sad. And he took extra time with me. Not only did he help me get over my loss, but he helped me become who I am today. He was a great teacher, and his evaluation should not reflect the outside forces that affect students that are far beyond a teacher's control. As a nurse, I don't want to be graded on my patients' outcomes. If that were the case, would anyone ever touch hospice or oncology? The truth here is not hard to find. It just needs to be explained so that the people in North Tonawanda can hear some bottom lines. It's not just about evaluating teachers. Let's face it, everyone in this room is evaluated on their professional field. That's really, truly not the issue. The issue is how. And then I may ask, who's going to pay for these extra rules for evaluating these teachers? Last year, our district was given the same amount of money it received in 2008 to function. In addition to the monies that matched 2008, we were given some things that we can't control, directives, if you will, from the state, all with a price tag, all with less money. The annual performance review, Common Core, teacher evaluations, etc., all of the costs to operate increase at a far faster rate than our budgets allow. The teachers are required to fit more in their schedules between subject matter, state testing, Common Core, etc. But when does it end? And then add GEA. The GEA, or Gap Elimination Adjustment, was initially done to help the state meet its budget deficit. calculation that's about this long has left districts coping with a cumulative impact of 4 consecutive years of state aid losses. The net impact has been detrimental to students in the form of personnel, program, and services cut and depletion of district reserves. The cuts and the degrees to which those cuts happen vary among all the districts. Board members statewide report having to make difficult staffing and programmatic changes based on this. But let me give you an example. That GEA calculation that's this long. Well, New York City is cutting its equestrian horseback riding. We here in North Tonawanda cut 78 jobs. 42 were teachers. That's right, 42. I cut math, social studies, and the classroom sizes are up in the upper 20s. The loss of state aid was $26 million. Mind you, my population didn't change. In conclusion, I stand before you as the president of the North Tonawanda City School District, and I speak for our school board. Ladies, can you stand up, please? We have a message to the New York State Department of Education and Governor Cuomo. We here in the city of North Tonawanda support our teachers. We support our children, and we support our community. We invite you for a day or two to come and witness firsthand North Tonawanda's educational system at work, to meet our community, and to sit at our budget hearings. Please come and see firsthand the impact of a larger decision that government makes and the impact it has on us, because this is about us. We welcome the opportunity to teach you, to show you, and to help guide you as we all look to improve education. Thank you.
I just need to do a quick check. Mrs. Gillen, how is that going? You're 40 minutes in. What page are we on? You think it? Okay. You do know, though, we want to make sure the budget's on time. We don't care really what it does, so as long as it's on time. This next gentleman, I got to pull out his credentials. I have him on my phone because he is one of the smartest people I met when I met him a couple of years ago. Just give me 1 second here. He was a 2012 New York State Outstanding Educator from Saney's. He was a 2013 Distinguished Elementary Principal Award from the Phi Beta Kappa. In 2014, he was a recipient of the SUNY at Buffalo Distinguished Alumni Award, President-elect of Saney's, Legislative Chairman for the Niagara Region PTA. He's also been a principal in the Tonawanda City School District since 1995, since I student talked there. He received his doctoral degree at UB in 2008, and the focus of his dissertation. This is John McKenna.
Enough of that stuff. Let's see if Steve, you going to put the presentation up there in a second? That's good, because I want to take you through, first of all, I want to thank you very much for having me here tonight. Thanks, Greg, for opening up your school and beautiful facility. I hope tonight, as we talk and go through some things, that I can teach you some things and go over some things, but I got to tell you, that big stack of stuff, I've been reading it over this last week, and it's hard to digest. So I hope that tonight I can share some information with you that arms you. Because I want you to leave here with information that's going to help you be warriors in this cause. Because you know what? When you're at Tops and when you're at Wegmans and people are saying stuff like, wow, I saw Governor Cuomo's commercial and he says it's really good. I want to give you the real facts and information so that you can refute things with accuracy. So some of my slides tonight, usually I don't like to put words in the slides, but I think for some of the things tonight I had to, because we need to read some things together. And as we read some of these, you're going to be like, what? Like that's real? We're like, yes. Some of the things are actually real, actually in that big pile of stuff. But let's go back a little bit. First of all, let's start with this. I want to say that if this has done a couple of good things, one thing is it's really united a lot of people, as you can tell. And these groups right here, when you look at the NISCUS and SANES and NYSUT and the New York State PTA, these groups don't always get along. And what you find is this legislation has really brought everybody united. And I can tell you, as the president-elect of SANES, we've never worked with some of these organizations like we are now. And I can tell you, too, that I know the governor likes to say that we're special interests. We are not. These groups here are not the special interests. We're the backbone of this profession. The special interests are the profiteers and all the vendors who are trying to take our profession. We are the backbone, and we are going to reclaim that, too. Next. I want to say this, too. There's a wall of fame, and I saw this that Eric Milberg will put this up on the site. And these were people that really were courageous. You know, they were given something, a lump of stuff, and you know what? A lot of these folks were at some of these forums, and they said they were going to be with us, vote for us, they were going to be courageous, and they said they were going to do the right thing, and they did. And let's give them a big round of applause. All these folks, remember them. Also, put the Penn Town Board of Education up there, too, because what they did was very, very, very special. Molly and Richard Dana are here right now. Molly and Craig Dana are here right now. And give them a round of applause. Bob Dana is Craig's dad. And I know you've been warriors in the cause. And tell your dad thank you. Because he's a real champion. What they did there was huge. And it would have been, I know what they did, they knew it was a statement. They knew that it was probably going to, but gosh, give them a lot of credit. That was brave and what a wonderful thing they did. We'll move on. Oh, and this is the other wall. I'm not going to call it anything because you know what? This is the folks that, for some reason or another, didn't vote and maybe the way they should have. Now, what I want to say about this is this, about the other wall. I like to think that I know some of these people. I like to think that these are good folks. I like to think they were misinformed. Or maybe they were handed a lump of stuff, like really at the last minute, and they didn't know exactly what they were doing. You get a pile like that, and you're given an hour to go through it. So I think we got a job to do, don't we? We need to inform these folks. Because you know what? There's going to be more votes. There's going to be another. This vote is this is round one of a 15-round heavyweight bout. And there's going to be another vote. And we're going to talk to these folks, and we're going to educate these folks. So you know what? The next time that vote comes up, they're going to vote with us. You all in with that? They're all with that? Here's a quick thing, and this is what was currently before, and I'll show you some of the contrasts of things. Before this legislation, we had 60% local evaluations, 20% was state tests, 20% student learning objectives. We know that, this is the way it kind of was. 60% was really myself as a principal and my administrators, colleagues. We controlled a big part of that. And obviously, and I thought that, even when we lost 40% of our control, I thought that was an overreach. I really did. I thought that was way too much that they ever took. But now, this new legislation is like egregious with the overreach. You show the next one. As we all know now, it's 50% state test. And there's going to be outside evaluators now that are going to come in and a principal evaluation. I don't know how many that is. I know it says there's probably at least one outside evaluation, at least one principal evaluation, but that still has to be hammered out. But we know that 50% now is going to be state test scores. So state test scores weren't just double down. They were more. These are like triple down. And when you see as we go through this, it's even worse than that. So we'll keep going. Here's just a quick little breakdown. I did a little bit of math here for you. I'm not a Common Core math guy, so this should be probably pretty easy to understand. I didn't need any tape diagrams or anything putting this together. This really shows that pie. If you look at 6 days, and basically, if they did outside evaluators, about 10, 11 hours that are going to be, it's going to take up 75 to 85% of the teacher's evaluation. And myself, as a building administrator, I'm with my teachers 181 days out of the year. After that, 1,357.5 hours. I get exposed to well over 1,000 lessons for each teacher, but yet what I'm going to have input on, and the administrators in my district, is only 15 to 25% of a teacher's evaluation. Show the next slide. That's just an unacceptable loss of local control. Unacceptable. These folks from the outside, they don't know our kids, they don't know our teachers, and the fact that, and then as we read some of the laws, we go on, they say we could swap and go to different districts too. So who knows? Maybe I'll be coming here to NT to do some evaluations for you, Greg. You never know. Next one. So here's what they voted for, the folks in this bill. Here's some of the nitty gritty. We might do a little bit of, we'll do some close reading here for just a minute or two. Now, there will be 2 evaluation categories, student performance, and there'll be observations, which we know. 50% will be the state scores, and they're based on state-provided growth scores and BAM, value-added model, which it's like a crazy formula where they measure actually the growth of what a teacher adds to the equation, but we know that that's junk science and unequatable stuff, and I'll talk about that as we go on too. And teachers without a state test will be evaluated by a SLO now developed by the state. It's interesting. It's an interesting change because we had local control before to develop some of our SLOs. They're saying now that they're going to be developed by the state. I don't know how that's going to work out, but again, how can the state come in and develop all of these things over us? Interesting. And we can also do an optional second test. I don't know who in their right mind would ever do that, but it's in there. Next. The observation component will be 2 required and 1 optional. Required observations will be performed by a principal administrator, an independent evaluator who can be a principal or administrator from another district, within the district or another district. So in other words, we can go to different districts and evaluate each other. So even though I've been hired in the city of Tonawanda, I can go to Kenton or North Tonawanda if that's the way we write these plans. I don't know about you, but that seems just cockamamie to me. That just seems ridiculous. I was hired by the city of Tonawanda to run a school in the city of Tonawanda. The principals here, they've been hired to do their jobs. Let us do our jobs. It says SCP will establish the scoring rubric, scoring bands, minimum evaluations, and other parameters. So anyways, anything that we do in evaluate, now this even gets worse. Go to the next one. Now here's what they're talking about this. Now SCP is going to establish these parameters now for how we evaluate. Listen to some of this stuff that was in there, which I find fascinating. Districts may no longer consider the following in determining educators' evaluation: lesson plans, student portfolios, and student or parent feedback surveys. Think about that. Lesson plans. So if teachers spend all kinds of time writing good lessons, developing good things for the classroom, that no longer matters. Does that make any sense? What about how, now here in North Tonawanda, you use Danielson too, right? What's domain 1? Planning and instruction. It's a whole domain. What are we going to, is it just gone now? Is that what it is? We don't value that? And what about portfolio assessments? Well, I love portfolio assessments, and the reason I like it is because after we get these goofy state scores that I have no idea how to help my staff with, at least with the portfolios, we can look at them, we can track real, authentic student work and really see how they progress. But that's not allowed. That defies all research that goes into education. Everything that you read, that's where they pulled that out of, it's just inappropriate. If teachers earn effective ratings based on student performance on required states, they may not earn effective or highly effective overall ratings. Show the next one. And this is this crazy grid they put on there. But really what this shows is, if you get ineffective in your student tests, there's no way that you can be effective. Look at that grid. See how that works right there? So there's no way, if you don't get good test scores, So even though there's all this rigmarole and nonsense, show the next slide. What it really means is your tests count for everything. It's wrong. That is absolutely wrong. You agree with me with that, right? Next one. And then there's like the threat, right? School districts will not receive an aid increase for the current year unless you submit your plan by November 15th. And the strong and how you got to do it and get it in by certain dates. And we don't even know where we're going to plan yet, right? It's going to be interesting. We don't even know how to do this. So it's going to be really interesting over the summer. And how about this one? Bonuses for teachers. Teachers who receive a highly effective rating will receive a $20,000 bonus. The bonuses we paid by SCD. I heard this tonight as part of a grant too that you got to apply for. So think about what is this going to do to collegiality among people? Well, sharing as a staff. We want people to work together. What is this going to do? If you know you're going to get $20,000, there may be kids you might say, I don't want those kids in my class because you know what? Those are the kids that don't score high on the test. I don't want them in my class anymore. I want that $20,000. I hope that anybody who gets this $20,000 gives that money back and says, I don't want your 30 pieces of silver. Just give it back. And we all know, too, that these state-provided growth scores, value-added measures, they're not valid and they're not reliable. I know just in my school, I've seen so many of my staff that were developing one year, highly effective the next. I know some people that were highly effective that went down to effective. It's all over the board. 1/3 of the teachers across the state changed levels in 1 year. That shows you how volatile and unpredictable those are. Next one. And now this is a quote I saw this week by Kathleen Cashier, one of our regents who get it. This is a good thing. That if you read what she mentions here too, and it's good to see. And another new hope is that we've got, 4 new regents that just got on board, right? I think there's 4. So maybe these new regents can bring some sanity. And Kathleen Cashier says some good things here. All of the basic research organizations, reputable research organizations across the United States and the world say don't do this. This is not reliable. This is not valid. Don't do it. And she says right there, at this time, we need to cease and desist in the use of these tests until such time as we can be confident in the reliability and validity. We have to listen to research. We have to listen to good common practice. We can't just say what's good, what's been proven research and say we're just not going to listen to it. It's too hurtful. Next one. And here's some good, this came up, this Celia Oler from Columbia. I just read these this week too. These are really good that backed up. Meryl Tisch came out with a letter this week saying how good these new proposals were. We saw this. And this professor from Columbia wrote back to Meryl Tisch telling her why that these things were not good. These tests are not measures of what an individual student has learned from year to year. As you know, they're 2 completely different tests. So don't even say, it's not even to say it's value-added model. It isn't. Because even by construct, it just isn't. So don't say it is. And then, in fact, these scores do not measure growth from year to year, but just one score on one test and one score on another. Next slide. And take a look. We also know from numerous adequate design studies that a teacher accounts only 10 to 15% of test score variance. To hold a teacher 50% responsible for a test score is scientifically unjustifiable. Study after study demonstrates that BAM has confidence intervals of as much as 60%. This is utterly insane and has enraged educators who understand what is being done to them. In other words, there's so much error in these things statistically that it's utterly insane to use them. Next. Oh, this is the discipline now, the 3020A, how you can be dismissed by this nonsense. And this is really scary stuff. 2 consecutive ineffectives and ratings, and you may be able to be, let's say, principal or evidence of incompetence can only be rebutted by clear and convincing evidence that the employee is not incompetent. So if you get 2 ineffectives and they say you may lose your job, they may press charges against you, and you have to prove that you're not incompetent. But those tests basically take our rights away and say that you are guilty until you are proven. You have to prove yourself innocent. The third one is the most egregious one yet. 3 consecutive ineffective ratings can only be rebutted by showing fraud in the ratings. fraud includes mistaken identity. They only allow one defense. Only one defense. So in other words, if you get, this is the definition of a kangaroo court, right here. This should not happen in the United States of America. This is not what the USA stands for. This is not how we treat people in this country. So this stuff cannot stand. This is so wrong on so many levels that we know, and they're not going to fool us and say this is good for kids and this is good for whatever. This is just wrong on all levels. Next. Oh, and that's what I just said. They may bring dismissal after 2, but they have to after 3. And then how about this one? Children will be allowed to testify in 3028 proceedings via closed-circuit video in some cases. What cases are these? Where they want to bring somebody in to, hurt their teacher? Why would you do this? Who is thinking this stuff up? When I read that, I thought, oh my God, this is sinister. There's something really wrong with this type of law. And that's why I say I know that the people who voted for these things, and some of they didn't read this stuff, because I know that they would never vote for this stuff. Next. I think it's just unjust laws. And I had a chance this week, and I was reading, and I know probably so many of you read it before too, the letter from a Birmingham jail, where Martin Luther King talks about, and he defines what are unjust laws, just and unjust laws. And if you take that letter and you look at all the things that he says are what are unjust laws, it fits this to a T. They're designed to oppress, control, discriminate, and punish. Any law that degrades human personality, distort the soul, is not ordered to in the common good, but merely to the private good of those who impose it. And look at the profiteers who are just raking in money from this. Give false sense of superiority to one group and a false sense of inferiority to others. Saying these charters and everything are so good and public education is failing. Right? It's just awful how they put this together. And relegates person to the status of things. And all I could think when I read that is, look what they've done to us. We're numbers. Our students now, they want to, and that's what Ryan so eloquently said earlier, he's not a number. And this is what they're trying to do, relegating us to things. Students as numbers, teachers as numbers, principals as numbers. That fits this to a T. And we're not going to accept it, are we? And here's the signs of injustice. There's protests and forums like you guys did here tonight. Kenton Board of Education doing resolutions against stuff. Very good. Opt-outs. And that's one of the things that you see. Why people, when things are injustice, they feel compelled to fight against things that are unjust. That's why there's so many opt-outs and those numbers are going. Not that, I don't know, there's no parents who say, I don't want my kids to take tests, but you know what? They don't like what these tests stand for. That's the whole purpose of this. After these groups have formed, and then there's just actually real signs. Show the next one too. Yeah, these are, one of my teachers sent this to me. These are from West Seneca. She sent, one of my teachers who lives in West Seneca sent this to me yesterday. He said, look at all the signs all over West Seneca. I said, oh, that's awesome. And there they are. But there's actually physical signs. And you see them not just in West Seneca, but you see them all over Western New York and all over our state. So these are the signs of injustice. Next. The governor's trying to blame teachers for his large incentive problem. Ron Deutsch, the executive director of Fiscal Policy Institute, said that just a couple of weeks ago, so grab that quote. That's a good quote. Next one. Teachers and administrators are required to register with SED every 5 years. Applicants for registration must complete 100 hours of continuing education. Some of that doesn't sound too bad. When you think, well, it's okay. We can all sharpen our saw. But some of the things that scared me about this one was SED shall issue rigorous standards for courses, programs, and activities that shall qualify as counting toward the requirement. So, they're the ones who are going to determine what counts as professional development. Now, we know if I want to send my teachers then to go get portfolios, they're going to count that? No. How about we're going to go learn how to plan some new and exciting lessons? Well, we're not going to be able to do that either. So who knows what's going to count as this requirement that has to be approved by SED? My guess is what's going to be approved, that they're going to say things that fit probably a drill and kill test culture. That's the stuff they want us to be good at, right? So my guess is that what they're going to train us in is how to do the model that they're imposing upon us. Doesn't that make sense? We don't know yet, but my guess is that's my hunch on that. And then teacher tenure, 4-year probationary period. You must earn effective or highly effective rating in 3 out of 4 years. If you get ineffective rating in your 4th year, you will not be offered tenure. It's not going to matter. Nobody's going into this profession now after this. Who's going in? Who are the brave souls going into this profession? Who can do this? And look at those tests. Who's going to be able to make it through this gauntlet? Nobody. I don't know who's going in. But, you know, I love this profession. And I hope that we can, that's why we got to change this, because this culture it's not good. And we need to always attract our best and brightest people to be teachers. It's too important for society. Thanks. And this is about receivership, and I think this is scary. I know some people are just saying, well, you know, it's just the lowest 5% of schools that this is going to do. So, well, this will be Buffalo and the Rochester, the urban areas that are real. First of all, there's a couple of things I really hate about this. I can't even stand the name failing schools. There is no failing schools. We've got failing policies right now, not failing schools. And how quick is that going to change? Once they get into this receivership, and it's maybe the 3, then another year, maybe lowest 5, 10% schools. If they want, and once this thing gets started, this reminds me. Remember the first graph I showed of the 60%, and now we're down to in building principals to maybe 15%, 20%. Who knows how this cancer is going to grow? Because once this gets started, and you won't get into this taking over school mode, this is a scary prospect. And I know the way it's going out now, that it's just for schools that really need these things. But these schools don't need receivers and dictators to come in. They need help and support and the money. And they need the resources to do the job, not a receiver. You know, this is ridiculous. So you go here, the schools, next one. The receiver will be able to replace the teachers, administrators, abolish positions, members of the teacher administration. My God. All local control. Think about that. How can that, again, in the United States of America, the local control belongs at the local level. We got wonderful school boards here, and school board presidents and members of our school board right here that care more about our community than any person from the outside that would ever come in. There's no need for this at all. Oh, the last one, go back to that next one. And I think this is the scariest thing. The receiver will be able to order the conversion of school and receivership that has been designated as failing or persistently failing into a charter school. Just think about that. And that's something we can't allow. Those are things that just cannot happen. Next. Okay, I got to start wrapping up here soon, too. I've been going on a little too long here. But I told you, a lot of slides, a lot of information. What are they voting for? This is in higher ed. I'm going to have Mark talk a little bit more about the higher ed, but they're doing all kinds of stuff with higher ed, too, even with the Ed TPA. I'll just talk a little bit. I can't stand the whole notion of the Ed TPA, because I guess, well, the teachers need to have these standards, and they need to, we've always had great schools with great standards. The people we've had coming out of our local colleges have been excellent. What I don't like is if they're trying to turn teachers into these type of teachers that are teachers of the Common Core. Ed TPA is all about teaching teachers to come out and be this type of a teacher. And you know what? Teachers, I don't want teachers to ever come into my building and just teach a program or do test prep. I want teachers that love children and want to teach children, not a test. I'll let Mark talk about a little more about higher ed, because I think that's his world. Next slide. Now, what are the ramifications? If all this stuff is ahead, as I'll tell you, test prep factories will be springing it. This is what school. If everything we're judged on is tests, what are we going to emphasize? Test prep, joyless, schools full of stress, no creativity, innovation, imagination, or fun. Increase in publicly funded and privately operated charter schools. And there's there's a few things in a great New York Times article this week about Success Academy. Anybody read that? Anybody read that? Good. Some of you read that. I had to put this in here because This is what the governor wants. And I'll show you, and you're invited to a Success Academy event in a couple of weeks. I'll show you the invitation in a few minutes. And Diane Ravitch also did an interview this week with a person from Success Academy. And some of the quotes and things that came out of this article were just startling. Take a look at the next one. I would cry almost every night thinking about the way I was treating these kids and thinking that that's not the kind of teacher I want to be. That was one. An administrator emailed staff that you must demand every single minute. We cannot let up on them. This is serious business, and there has to be misery felt by the kids who are not doing what is expected of them. They also have high suspension rates, 23%, compared to 4% in the state average. Just boot kids if they don't follow the rules. Next. High teacher turnover, they say about 50%. That's being disputed now, but we'll see. Most of the teachers left because they disagreed with Success's approach that they found punitive. Former staff members describe students in third grade and above wetting themselves during practice tests. Wetting themselves, not letting them get up and go to the bathroom, or the kids felt so much pressure that they were wetting their pants. They had extra clothes, the article said, that they keep in class so when kids wet themselves, they had extra clothes for them. The goal is to shame the lowest performing students. Next. Some of the kids explode or break down. They are very young and the pressure gets to be too much for them. They might start screaming or crying and they have to be removed from the classroom. She felt badly for the children who were humiliated. A harshly competitive environment, she said, was dispiriting and joyless. Next. This was the picture, you can't really see, but this was in the New York Times, and the picture of these kids walking was very sad, because if you look at their faces, they're just absolutely joyless. And Diane Ravitch said little children walking in straight lines, not a smile in sight. But there are people in the article that like this. There's people that believe this is order, this is discipline, this is good, this is what should be in schools. But I'll go against anybody anytime on it, because kids need joy, and they need creativity, and they need to express themselves. This is unnatural for a young child. Next. Now, 2 successful cohorts of 8th grade students have applied for entry to New York City selective high schools like Bronx Science and Stuyvesant, and not one was able to pass the admissions test despite years of test prep. And then Celia Oler, that's the lady who from Columbia answered Meryl Tish's letter this week, says, well, that's because you've only taught them how to take one test. That's what Ryan was talking about when he did his thing earlier, too. So you teach somebody to take one test, there's no transfer. So you can take one test. What does that mean? You're not a lifelong learner. You're a creative thinker. You're not innovative. As soon as something different comes along, you don't know what to do. So how is this helping kids get better? It's not. It's making them worse. Because once it goes outside of what they've been drilled and killed to do, they can't do it. So that was a great point that I thought came up out of the article. And then I like the response by the teacher from Columbia. Next. So why would anyone do this? When you think of what just happened, you know what I mean? And it's pretty obvious. The profiteers, the privateers, this is union busting, make no mistake of that. There's hedge fund profit motives, there's Wall Street investors. This is the corporate reform agenda, alive and well. And it's taking, and like was mentioned too, all the money that hasn't come to our schools, it's going to those schools. It's not right. Next. Here's an interesting, as I was telling you, and I'm not making this up when you read this. You're all invited, because Success Academy is having their 3rd annual spring benefits hosted by Campbell Brown and Governor Andrew Cuomo. Not kidding. It's at Cipriani, 42nd Street in Manhattan. When? On April 20th. So if you're not doing anything, April 25th, tickets start at $1,250. Tables start at $15,000. The keynote speaker is Andrew Cuomo, and they're honoring Eli Broad. Holy smolies. You think I'm making that up? But is that unbelievable? So there you go. When I saw that this week, I thought it was a joke. Doesn't that sound like a joke? Andrew Cuomo and Campbell Brown are hosting, and for Eva Moskowitz's Success for All, and Eli Broad for, my God, and all the things that he's done for the forwarding of charter schools and his Broad Academy where he trains those superintendents. Greg, you probably heard of them, that have just wreaked havoc over districts. It's amazing. But that's coming. So I don't know if we can all pitch in. So we'll send Mark Garrison for that. What do you think, Mark? Want to go? Next. Well, here's some hope, though. You know, some good things. So that's stuff that I hope helps with, you know, what happened over the last little bit. That's some of the stuff in that bill. But there's some good things, believe it or not, that happened this week that are like very encouraging. The Elementary Secondary Education Act, which is No Child Left Behind, I'm not sure if you're familiar with that, and encompasses Race to the Top. They're reauthorizing it right now. And that actually looks very positive. It reaffirms the state's role in determining education standards. The bill reaffirms that states decide what academic standards they will adopt without interference from Washington. So at a federal level, they've heard our voices. They're doing some good things. The bill allows, but does not require, states to develop and implement teacher evaluation systems. So before, when they would say all this stuff, like, well, we have to do it because it's No Child Left Behind, it's Race to the Top, they're changing this now at a federal level. Next. The Act maintains annual testing, but leaves to states the authority to decide how to use the scores. AYP is gone, according to the new author. What's it, Mark? Do you know what it's called? The Education Act, or the Education for All Act, something. I forget. I should have put it on there. But anyways, that's huge. That is absolutely huge. So in other words, we can have latitude and leeway to develop tests in our state how we meet the needs of our state. So this is good. The federal government may not mandate or incentivize states to adopt or maintain any particular set of standards, including Common Core. States will be free to decide what academic standards they will maintain in their states. If this goes through, this is game-changing for our country. So we got to hope that this goes through. Now, they still are saying that they want annual tests, and I say that's okay as long as we have good tests. As long as we can get together and write some good tests, not bad at all. The one thing, too, that they don't like about this is it's still, I guess, at the 1%, they only 1% exemption for special education, which is not good. And I hope that changes because I really feel strongly that special needs students should not be taking these tests. Next. The sanctioned events still being raised to the top are gone. States can choose to be punitive or not. And this is a great quote by Diane Ravitch about this. Now the battle shifts to the state legislators, where parents can make their voices heard. This gives you a chance, and us a chance, to recreate, to make ourselves be heard, so that we can do some changes. So even though there was just a vote that didn't go in our favor, this is going to give us more latitude, more leeway, and more opportunity to work with those legislators and craft things here in New York State that can be better. Next. And they have to be, because this is just failing policies. This is not failing teachers and failing schools. When you see this type of failure that these tests have brought on us, this is failing policy, and failing policy must change. But now we can change it. Next. There are some positive solutions that myself and some colleagues got together, and we said if we could do these things, if we could just make some of these things come into reality, and now there's no reason why they can't. There's no reason. There's no race to the top. There's no NCLB saying we can't do these things because our state doesn't have the power to do these things. Well, you know what? We're now going to have the power to do these things. And we'll be able to decouple teacher evaluations from student test scores. Would you like to see that happen? Let's do it. Allow teachers and administrators to develop state assessments along with SED. Let's do it. Return local control to districts to develop teacher evaluations and student assessments. Let's get the state out of it. Here's one of the things that I think if we could do this would just be huge. Return to New York State multiple diplomas. Let's do it. Think of what we do. Why not? Why don't we do this now? We know it's the right thing to do. Fully fund universal pre-K and K. Next. Smaller class sizes. Remember we used to have the smaller class size reduction. It was huge. Provide funding for enrichment, after school, and summer programs. I remember we used to have the funding for that too. We used to have, I used to have a whole catalog at my school. I had probably like 12 or 14 different, Rachel remembers. We used to have a whole category of things you could stay and do all these enrichment after school. It's all gone. Let's bring it back. Eliminate the GDA. Return the funding to the schools. You deserve this funding. We got to use our technology to enhance education and not assess it. And now, if we're not bound by Common Core, well, let's develop a constructivist, individualized, hand-on curriculum where kids love to learn. Let's do it! I took this picture from my Creative Innovation Fair this year. The kids had such a great time doing it. And that's what we should be doing in school all the time. We should be doing creative innovation fairs, you know what I mean, once a year. It should be every day in our schools. This is what kids should be coming into. And it's up to us to make it so. And I love this John Dewey quote, what the best and wisest parent wants for his own child, that must the community want for all its children. And you know what? When you think about Andrew Cuomo and John King, our former commissioner, and you think about Barack Obama and all these folks, their kids go to schools where they're not taking these crazy tests. They're going where they have constructivists. All of our kids deserve that kind of education. Every one of them. Why not? Right? Why not? If the shackles have been lifted and we're going to be having opportunities to do this, now's the time. We're going to have a moment in time where, yes, there's bad stuff that just got voted in, but you know what? Let's work together with our legislators, our boards of education, and all those groups that I had the pictures on, and let's do something different and better for our kids and our communities. You know, I'm going to end with that. I know there's one, but you know what? I'm going to end on that right now. I want to thank you so much for being a good audience. I hope this helped you. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. McKenna. Mrs. Gillen, I'll let you do a little bit of speed reading. If you want to go to where the Post-it note is, that's where the actual education bill starts. So it's page 863. No, I'm not kidding. If you go down about another 750 pages, you probably got through and you'll see it. It's a little sticky note there somewhere. This time, I'd like to call up one of my fellow colleagues. It's an amazing teacher. She's great. You go down there. I helped her this year. Gives me some protractors. And she taught me how hard that is. And this is Mrs. Karen Anderson.
Good evening, and thank you for getting here Friday night to be here. As Steve mentioned, I'm a 4th grade teacher here in the North Tonawanda School District, and currently this year I'm teaching mathematics. And anyone who knows me knows how I get jazzed about numbers. So in my classroom, we have a daily part of our routine that's called Inside the Numbers, where a student comes up to the front of the class and leads us in some kind of activity where we're learning about numbers and they're in the spotlight and everyone's happy. So I decided to run my little speech tonight about Inside the Numbers with your host, Karen Anderson. Let's start with the first number, 540. Did you know that our elementary students can sit for over 540 minutes each year for state assessments? This number does not even include the numerous other tests that they take for music, art, and physical education. Nor does it reflect our students who are entitled to additional time, who could receive over 800 minutes to complete their tests. Yet in contrast, the New York State bar exam for lawyers, or failing governors, is only 360 minutes. That hardly seems right or fair. The results from these tests are not even made available for months. Sadly, the data we do eventually receive provides us with very little information about our students' strengths or weaknesses. Which begs the question then, why are we doing this? And I'll get to that. The next numbers are 4, 3, 2, and 1. These, of course, refer to the grading scale for the ELA and math exams. When I sit down at parent-teacher conference time, I feel foolish when I slide the test results from the previous year across the table. I attempt to describe this hazy, cloudy number rating that their child's been given. In fact, you may not know that the actual scoring levels are not determined until all of the tests have been scored. So in other words, what might have been a 3 last year could be a score of a 2 this year, which would require some form of remedial help for a student. It's like telling a child to run a race, but we don't know where the finish line is. And let's talk about the students who earn a 3 or a 4. In the eyes of the state, these children have reached or exceeded our expectations for achievement. And you may even think that if a teacher was able to get all of their students to that level, that would be an outstanding accomplishment. Nope. In some cases, that's not even enough. Teachers are faced with showing that each child improves a minimum of 2% from the previous year. And for some of our highest achieving students, there is not even a score they can achieve that wouldn't otherwise harm a teacher's evaluation. And something's wrong when that's the process. The next number is 0. Foolishly, I know nothing about the test that was given their child. Teachers are forbidden to even speak about the test with one another. We sign a document that demands our silence about these tests, and that alone is highly suspicious. So instead, we commiserate at the lunch table with stories about our little ones crying, vomiting, panicking, and even surrendering. We pat their heads and tell them, it's okay, just do your best. And I silently pray that it will be warm enough that afternoon to let them go to the playground, to run and play and laugh. And just maybe they will forget about the anxiety of that morning until we repeat it again the next morning, and the morning after that, and the week after that, and in 4th grade, the month after that. The next number is 72. In early March, with my lesson plan book lying before me, I began to count the number of days that were left until the state assessments. And then I looked at what curriculum I had remaining. There are not enough days. And so that choking feeling begins, and I'm trying not to panic. So I start to consider, what skills can I combine? Surely my kiddos can handle adding and subtracting fractions in one lesson, right? And it becomes a reckless game of how much can I fit in? When will I review? What lessons can I carefully select to omit? Gambling and hoping there might not be a test question for that skill, and the burden becomes heavy. But you see, I have 72 beautiful 9-year-olds on my mind who are relying on my judgment, and they need and deserve so much more than gambling and hoping. They deserve a comprehensive, age-appropriate, thoughtful education with a balance of meaningful instruction and meaningful tests. We were fed a lie when the chaos of Common Core was rolled out. We were told fewer skills, reduced content, but richer depth. That's a scam. You see, it all comes back to child development. No matter how high we set our standards or embed rigor into our lessons, we cannot change how children grow and mature and develop. And for that reason, the current state assessments are not reliable or valid. And if you don't believe me, come into my classroom when I'm trying to teach a 4th grader how to use a protractor to construct a 75-degree angle, when in reality, I'd be tickled if they could hold their pencil correctly. The next number is 900. When the governor created the recent education bill, he craftily bundled burdensome policies with a financial carrot. It may frighten you to learn that legislators were given less than 2 hours to read a 900-page document before casting their vote. He employed a tactic called a message of necessity. It's a powerful governor's tool that allows for immediate votes to be taken on complex legislation that otherwise would have had days for debate. In the name of passing an on-time budget, our elected leaders frantically cast votes that negatively impacted the education of thousands of students and the professional careers of thousands of educators. The next number up is 50. The legislature caved to Cuomo's demand that your child's test score will be 50% of a teacher's annual evaluation. The obvious fear is that the almighty test will hijack our time and attention in the classroom and trump all of the other essential learning opportunities that should be a part of a quality education. I applaud your choice to attend today's forum. I honor your sacrifice of time to be an active participant in this educational battle that we are facing together. Sadly, our governor and many of our elected officials chose to ignore the thousands of teachers and parents and administrators and school board members and students who rallied across the state to shake Albany and implore them to do what is right for public education. After the adoption of the state budget last week, 7 months has been given to create a teacher evaluation process that is pivotal to the public education of our entire state. As many of us know, one of the most recognized calamities of the implementation of Common Core was the reckless pace the way things were rolled out. We are repeating history with yet another tragedy of this irresponsible initiative to link teacher evaluations with student testing. But most tragic of all, these tests will not provide information so that you and I can come together to create an educational plan that's best for your child. Your child is the pawn that will provide data to measure if teachers are capably doing their jobs. And that's not what tests are for. And the final number is 1, you. Instead of reading about history, we can be the history makers. Let's build on the energy and support that's palpable here tonight. I'm hoping that you have the courage and conviction to let your voices be heard with the choices you make. It is our message of necessity. North Tonawanda and Western New York values our children, and we will do what we have to provide the best education possible. It's been my honor to speak before you tonight.
Tonight, Dr. Mark Gibson is a professor of education policy and research at UVille College in Buffalo since 1995. He has worked in various higher education institutions, serving in a variety of research, administrative, and faculty roles. Mark is a recognized education policy analyst and public intellectual focusing on the political, sociological, and philosophical role standardized tests play in the reform of public education. He is author of over 50 manuscripts appearing in edited books, peer-reviewed journals, professional newsletters, and for presentation at the professional conferences. His scholarship has won him national acclaim, including the 2011 American Education Studies Association Critics' Choice Award and the 2010 Choice Outstanding Academic Title for his book, A Measure of Failure, The Political Origins of Standardized Testing. How you doing, over here, Dr. Mark Gibson.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for coming. Thank you for the administrators at the school board, and most of all, the parents and the teachers and students who are here. I think everybody did a really great job. And on behalf of the Board of Regents, I am authorized to award each of them an honorary doctoral degree. So, I kind of see my role right now as a role of summing up. So the first thing, you've heard all of what you've heard. You've been presented with a lot of information and passion and feeling and ideas and demands. What word describes what we've been experiencing in public education? What word comes to mind after the description of this new law? In the law, the Race to the Top program in the Common Core, what's that word? Madness, oppression. We're told it's the era of accountability. Is this accountability? No. When the system is designed to make students yearning in their pants in school, this is training of a population to submit to humiliation so that they will accept their oppression. We are going through a historic period in this country that is as significant as Civil War era. The actions of the governor suggest that our government has moved beyond the arrangements that were made where you have an executive branch, a legislative branch, and a judicial branch, and they share power. The idea was that if any one branch would secure power over the others, it was called what? Tyranny. When we're told that the governor is holding the budget hostage, we're being told that the mechanisms of governance, as written in the state law, in the state constitution, and in the federal constitution, no longer hold sway. It is not that Cuomo should go. It's that he should be impeached. He has no right to go until he is held accountable for what he has done and what he is doing. There should be a full investigation of his relationship to Pearson. The legislation that was so described and apparently still being read must be immediately repealed. All necessary laws that must be made to repeal that legislation must take place now. We will not wait. I am no longer going to beg a politician to do their job, to be told that I am not accountable as an educator. I will not wait to be told that we can't wait anymore for privatization, that we can't wait anymore to take public assets and turn them over to charter schools. We are not going to wait. They will change the law or they will be removed by one means or another. Why do we refuse? We refuse because we want and demand to renew public education. We reject the idea that local control is somehow parochial and some sort of private national corporation can dictate and somehow that's enlightened. We reject the idea that we only want control over our local schools. We also want control over the national program. We have a right to have a say at all levels. We reject the false debate that if only parents had choice to choose a private school, everything would be better. Education is a right that the society is duty-bound to provide to every single child, irrespective of their race, their religion, their color, their national origin, their ability. We are a modern society. We must provide the highest level. Common Core lowers the level. It is a lie. It is not anything but rigor, which means death. Rigor mortis, stiff, inflexible. This is not enlightened. It is inconsistent with psychology, the wisdom of sociology, what we know from anthropology, what we know from the cultures of the world, people's languages and religions and beliefs. When the test is used to attack, it's no longer a test, it's a weapon. We are not against testing. We are not against assessment any more than we are against an economy because we don't like economic policy. Well, you're against testing. No, I'm against stupid ideas. You don't like standards. I think the question is, who sets the standard? We will not accept any assessment that we do not help design. No community, no teacher, no professional association should accept any assessment, any standard, any curriculum that it does not have a say in. Because this is not only a democratic principle, it is what ensures that, in fact, no one is left behind. If you want no one to be left behind, then all must be involved. Do you know where the origin of value-added model comes from? You heard about the value-added model, which is the idea that we can tease out the part of the teacher that's responsible for a child's particular learning, irrespective of the level of poverty in the community, or whether or not the family speaks English, or whether or not their grandfather just died. Do you know where that idea comes from? Biostatistics, agribusiness, studying plants. I know. Usually the more educated you get, the dumber the stuff that comes out of your mouth is, right? I know, hey, let's use the model of how we grow plants and do genetic engineering to educate kids. You guys into that? Yeah, sounds good. Value-added modeling emerged in the United States when something very important was happening. Small school districts, medium school districts, maybe like North Tonawanda, started filing lawsuits about funding inequality. And they started having some results. State courts and judges started hearing these cases. Some people, like the Business Roundtable, became concerned. One of the biggest lies of the last 40 years is that money doesn't matter in terms of the outcomes of schooling. In fact, it's one of the most significant predictors. If you want high results, you got to pay for it. There's no other way around it. If you want great teachers, you got to pay for it. If you want great buildings, you got to pay for it. And every single child requires that to be a full, flourishing member with their talents and their dreams and their wishes of how they want to contribute. It costs money. It costs a lot of money. So, what are we going to do, guys? These court cases. I know, let's shift the conversation to accountability and testing. Good idea. The whole history, and I've been reading it now for a year, of value-added model and teacher evaluation is a strategic political move to shift the discussion from demands of communities like yours to increase funding to meet the ever-growing educational needs of the community. And instead, we're going to say the real problem is teachers aren't effective. You need to get those test scores up because that's a great indicator. That reform does two things. One is, it's cheap. Two, it does something even more important. Over the last 40 years, we've witnessed a growing movement, not just with this law, not just with Race to the Top, a movement of the governance of education from the public sphere to the private sphere, largely by way of standardized test control. Regents exams used to be made by who in New York State? Who makes them now? That's a move of control over curriculum and assessment from the public domain and professional educators rooted in their own communities to the private domain. When educators would get together in Albany making up the Regents exam, downstate teachers and upstate teachers would find language that wouldn't trip up their respective students. So people who ride the subway every day and live in the Bronx have a different set of things that they're recognized readily every day than folks who live in, say, Lackawanna. Or even a rural area outside of Ithaca, New York, for example. And so the teachers would work this out and build assessments. Do you know the Regents exams in New York State and the Regents curriculum was the envy of the entire country? And we decided to essentially privatize it. And now we have pineapples? This fight is actually a fight about resources. Why do you want charters? Why do they want charters? There's two reasons. One, they're cheap. Two, they make realtors a lot of money. Well, there's actually three reasons then, isn't there? And the third one is there a way in which to shift the control over education? Charter schools don't exist in the same governance structure as a public school. So we have a superintendent, right? Who does the superintendent report to? And where does that come from? The community. Not so with your charter school governance. What we're seeing, the governor thing, the legislator thing, is a historic thing that's been happening for decades. We're only become aware of it as a public right now. There's been a huge shift in governance. Things moving slowly into the private sphere where they can't be seen. This idea that teachers sign a waiver, they're not allowed to talk to the test. I mean, I don't know, what I'm sort of like, it's like bad Saturday Night Live or something. What is that, though? What do we call that? Oligarchy is one word. What do you call that? When a government acts this way, how should it be treated? We have to think very carefully about what this represents in larger terms than just education. This is extremely arbitrary, and it's extremely authoritarian. So let's go back to Success Academy. I have a story. My friend, my colleague, she has a sister. Her sister worked at Success Academy for 3 months. Would you like to hear a story about what she saw? First, I have the handbook that the Success Academy teachers must use. Every single utterance from the teacher's mouth comes from a script that they must use, and they are monitored for using that script, including if a student, who must be called a scholar, wants to throw out a piece of paper from their desk, there is a specific line with a specific number that the teacher must use. Why? Why would you want an education system like that? Yes, it's cheap because the teachers are replaceable. True. What are you socializing young people to be? Robots. Great. Here's a quote from the president of the Business Roundtable, a very important organization that has been supported and behind the Common Core non-state standards, because the states had no role in it. When the products, this is the quote, when the products leave K through 12, they will go to industry, college, or the military. When the products leave K through 12, Common Core standards are a set of product specifications to make things to be bought and sold on the market. Things have no rights, no vision. Things can be standardized and produced. And when you're putting things on a shelf to be bought and sold as an Amazon, they must have a number. This is a vision of a certain section of humanity to be treated essentially as a biological machine for someone else's use. It's an extremely dark vision. And Cuomo's fully in support of it. And those legislators, uninformed or not, that's no excuse. Step away from the plate if you can't bat. If you can't read the law, you are duty-bound to say, I refuse to vote. So, we refuse because we refuse to have our schools turned into profit centers for corporations that aren't even housed in our own country. We refuse because we demand to have a say over how our teachers are evaluated, how our schools are evaluated, and how our students are evaluated. We decide. And until that happens, we're not going to take a test, whether it's nationally imposed, state imposed, or some other alien force. That's why we refuse. People say, oh, it's a war against testing. That's like saying when the soldiers come onto the foreign soldiers come on your soil and they shoot at you, you say, we better have a war against the guns. No, there's an enemy who's firing at us. And that's actually what's happening now. We have to realize that. Public institutions, the public's right to govern is under direct explicit attack with the full force of an enormous amount of money from private foundations, corporations, and people who occupy government offices who are supposed to represent us. We refuse because we have a new vision for education. We will take the wisdom of the past. That's what's being attacked, by the way. This silly teacher evaluation stuff is to attack the collective wisdom that has been generated by generations of professional teachers and educators over 150, 200 years. It's being eradicated and destroyed. It's a cultural treasure. It's being blown up. And yet we know there's things from the past in public education that we will never repeat. And we are poised to never repeat it. And we're being blocked from fully living up to the possibility of public education in this country. At a time when everyone is starting to get what's needed and be able to articulate it, that's precisely when it's being attacked. So refusing is about saying that we decide. And I liken it to no taxation without representation. Unless we're part of that assessment, we refuse. And I'm not holding my breath for any of those folks. And there's one thing we can do right now, right this week, and that's to refuse loud and clear. And we support our schools, we support our superintendent, we support our school board. At risk of not saying something dumb.
I want to thank everyone for coming. This has been a lot to get together in a short period of time, and you guys made it very successful.
I see students here. They've already put in 2 school days on a Friday night. I see parents here. A round of applause for you. Thank you very much.
I just want to thank a few people. Mr. Witilla, who graciously allowed me to put all this together and get everything together. He makes robocalls and let me get in here over break to actually get things moving on here. Our panelist speakers, phenomenal, excellent information. Patty Moneykaisen, who helped arrange the rally portion of this. Chris Easton, who acted as our little goal for both of us getting things done. So thank you there. And finally, the North Tonawanda Board of Education for allowing us to use a fine facility that we see here. And on your way out, there is a table with information. I suggest you stop by and grab some information from there. And everyone else, hey, have a good night. And by the way, the Sabres are tied.
I want you to meet this.